Claire Martinez stood in the center of the grand hall on Concordia Prime. The station floated in neutral space, far from any star system. Around her sat representatives from 300 different alien species. Some had scales, others had fur. Some breathed oxygen, others required methane chambers. But all of them stared at her with the same expression: fear. She cleared her throat and began to speak. Her voice echoed through translation devices that converted her words into hundreds of languages. The United Earth government has made its decision. After 200 years of membership, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately, all human diplomatic staff will return to Earth territories. All human peacekeeping forces will be recalled within 6 months. The hall erupted, not with protests or pleas for humanity to stay. Instead, the aliens shouted at each other. The Threll representative, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, pointed an accusing finger at the Vakoth delegate. The Vakoth, covered in blue scales and standing on 6 legs, hissed back in response. Chancellor Vrel of the Aquian sovereignty raised his webbed hands for silence. The fish-like alien spoke with a trembling voice. "Ambassador Martinez, your species has kept the peace for 2 centuries. What will happen when you leave?" Claire looked at him with sad eyes. She had asked Earth the same question. "That will be up to all of you." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she meant. For 200 years, humanity had been the galaxy's problem solver. When trade disputes arose, humans mediated. When wars threatened, humans intervened. When pirates raided shipping lanes, human fleets hunted them down. The other species had grown comfortable letting humans handle the difficult work. Across the station, Commander Jake Sullivan watched the announcement on a screen. He stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Ship Ranger, one of 50 human vessels stationed around Concordia Prime. His crew worked quietly at their stations, already preparing for departure. "Sir, we're receiving mobilization alerts from multiple alien fleets," said Lieutenant Sophie Blake, his second officer. She was young but sharp, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Jake studied the tactical display. Red markers appeared across the star map, each one representing an alien military force powering up weapons and engines. "They're not mobilizing to stop us from leaving." "No, sir," Sophie agreed. "They're preparing for what happens after we're gone." Jake had served in the defense fleet for 20 years. He had stopped 3 wars before they started. He had protected colony worlds from raiders. He had escorted refugee ships to safety. The work was exhausting, thankless, and never-ending, but he had believed it mattered. Now he wondered if humanity had done more harm than good. By always rushing to help, had humans made the other species weak? Had they prevented the galaxy from learning to solve its own problems? In the diplomatic quarters, Claire Martinez packed her belongings. She had lived on Concordia Prime for 15 years. She knew the station better than her apartment on Earth. But orders were orders. A knock came at her door. She opened it to find Chancellor Vrel standing there. The Aquian looked older than when she had first met him. The pressure of leadership had worn him down. "May I come in?" he asked. Claire stepped aside. Vrel entered and sat down heavily. His species came from ocean worlds, and even with artificial gravity, they always looked tired on stations. "Why is humanity doing this?" Vrel asked. "We need you." Claire sat across from him. "That's exactly the problem, Chancellor. You need us too much. The Threll and Vakoth have been threatening war for 30 years. The only reason they haven't fought is because they're afraid of how humanity would respond. That's not peace. That's just delayed violence. So you're forcing us to fight?" "We're forcing you to find another way," Claire said gently. "Humanity can't police the galaxy forever. We have our own problems, our own dreams. We want to explore beyond the galactic rim, to see what's out there in the dark. But we can't do that while babysitting 300 species." Vrel's shoulders sagged. "Within 6 months of your complete withdrawal, the galaxy will be at war. Multiple wars. Species that have hated each other for generations will finally act on that hatred." Claire didn't argue. She knew he was right. Intelligence reports supported his prediction. Every major faction was already planning military operations, just waiting for the humans to leave. "Then maybe those wars need to happen," Claire said quietly. "Maybe the galaxy needs to learn the cost of conflict. Maybe species need to learn that peace requires work from everyone, not just humans." Vrel stood up slowly. "I hope you're right, Ambassador. Because if you're wrong, millions will die." After he left, Claire sat alone in the quiet room. She hoped she was right too. But hope wasn't certainty, and doubt gnawed at her conscience. Aboard the Ranger, Jake Sullivan received final departure orders. The human fleet would begin its withdrawal in waves. His ship would be among the last to leave, making sure all human civilians got out safely. Sophie Blake approached with a datapad. "Sir, I've been analyzing the mobilization patterns. The Threll are positioning forces along the Vakoth border. The Vakoth are doing the same. But there's something else." She brought up a star map. "Smaller factions are mobilizing too. The Klarn hive worlds, the Zentari corporate fleets, even independent colonies. Everyone is preparing for conflict." Jake studied the map. Red markers covered entire sectors. "It's like watching dominoes line up. Once the first one falls, they'll all go down." "Should we warn Earth?" Sophie asked. "Earth already knows," Jake said. "They knew this would happen when they made the decision to leave. The politicians decided it's not our problem anymore. But Jake knew it would feel like their problem. Human crews would watch the news broadcasts. They would see alien refugees fleeing wars. They would see cities burning and fleets clashing. And they would ask why humanity did nothing. The answer wouldn't satisfy anyone. Humanity was leaving because staying had become unsustainable. The galaxy was too big, the conflicts too numerous, the responsibility too heavy. Earth's resources were stretched thin. Human crews were exhausted. And most importantly, the other species had stopped trying to solve their own problems. Jake gave the order to begin preparations. All across the station, human personnel packed up their offices. Diplomatic missions closed. Trade offices shut down. Military outposts began dismantling their equipment. The process was orderly and efficient. Humans were good at leaving. They had practice from centuries of exploration and colonization. On the station's observation deck, a young Klarn named Skrill watched the human ships preparing to depart. His species had been at peace for a century, protected by human patrols that kept pirates away from Klarn trade routes. Now those patrols would end. Skrill's mandibles clicked nervously. His people were not warriors. They were merchants and scholars. Without human protection, would the Klarn survive in a galaxy at war? He wasn't alone in his fear. All across the station, aliens from peaceful species gathered to watch the humans leave. They had no weapons, no fleets, no way to defend themselves. They had relied on humanity for protection, and now that protection was being withdrawn. Claire Martinez made one final walk through the council chambers. The Great Hall was empty now. The emergency session had ended hours ago, dissolving into arguments and accusations. No decisions had been made. No plans had been formed. The council was paralyzed. She placed her hand on the podium where she had given her final speech. 2 centuries of human effort, ending with a simple announcement. It felt anticlimactic. Her communicator buzzed. It was time to board the transport. Earth was calling its children home. As Claire walked toward the docking bay, she passed windows looking out into space. She could see human ships beginning to move, leaving their positions around the station. One by one, they aligned and jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading toward Earth territories. Behind them, alien fleets moved to fill the void. The race for position had already begun. And somewhere out in the darkness, Claire knew weapons were being armed and orders were being given. The galaxy was preparing for war. Humanity had left, and now everyone would see what happened next. 3 months had passed since the last human ship left Concordia Prime. President Helen Carter sat in the Global Defense Coordination Center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Screens surrounded her, each showing a different sector of the galaxy. Almost all of them displayed the same thing: war. General Paul Hendricks stood beside her desk, holding a data pad filled with intelligence reports. His face looked tired. He had barely slept in weeks. "The Threll Empire struck first," he said, pointing to a screen showing the Valen sector. "They hit 3 Vakoth colony worlds simultaneously, caught them completely off guard. Civilian casualties are estimated at 15 million. Helen felt sick. She had voted against the withdrawal, but the council had overruled her. Now she had to live with the consequences. "The Vakoth response?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Overwhelming," Paul said. "They mobilized their entire fleet. 17 Threll worlds are under attack. Both sides are committed now. This won't be a short war." Helen switched to another screen. It showed a different conflict in the Meridian sector. What's happening here? Corporate war, Paul explained. 3 different trade coalitions fighting over shipping lanes. They're using mercenary fleets. No rules of engagement, no concern for civilians. It's a bloodbath. Another screen showed refugee ships, thousands of them fleeing war zones. They drifted through space with nowhere to go. The Galactic Council had tried to organize relief efforts, but without human logistics and human funding, the efforts had collapsed. Helen's communicator buzzed. It was a call from the Galactic Council, the 5th one this week. She silenced it. They wanted humanity to come back, to fix the mess. But Earth's position was clear. The galaxy had to learn to solve its own problems. How many conflicts total? Helen asked. Paul consulted his datapad. 17 major wars, 43 regional conflicts, and over 100 border disputes that could escalate at any moment. The death toll is approaching 2 billion. 2 billion. The number was too large to comprehend. Helen closed her eyes and thought about her responsibility. Was this her fault? Was this humanity's fault? Or was this inevitable? Far from Earth, on the frontier colony of New Horizon, Captain Ben Rogers faced his own crisis. His sensors had detected a convoy under attack. Not a military convoy. Civilians. Klarn refugees fleeing the violence in their home sector. "Sir, we should help them," said his tactical officer, a young man named Chris Page. Ben stared at the screen. He could see the Klarn ships clearly. They were old transport vessels, barely armed. 3 Threll raiders were circling them like sharks. The Klarn didn't stand a chance. "Our orders are clear," Ben said quietly. "No intervention. We're not the galaxy's police anymore." "But they're civilians," Chris protested. "There are children on those ships." Ben knew. He could see the life signs on his sensors. Thousands of Klarn, mostly families. They had done nothing wrong. They were just trying to survive. "If we intervene, we'll be court-martialed," Ben said. But even as he spoke, he was making calculations. His ship could reach the convoy in 3 minutes. His weapons could disable the raiders in less than 1. Chris turned away from the screen. Then we just watch them die? Ben had served alongside Klarn crews during his years in the defense fleet. They were good people, honest merchants who valued knowledge and peace. They didn't deserve this. He made his decision. "Battle stations," Ben ordered. "Prepare weapons." "Sir?" Chris looked surprised. "We're protecting a human trade route," Ben said firmly. "Those raiders are threatening commerce in this sector. We're authorized to engage threats to human interests." Chris smiled. "Yes, sir. That's exactly what they're doing." The ship accelerated. Ben's crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this 100 times before. The only difference was that officially they weren't supposed to do it anymore. The Threll raiders detected the human ship and immediately broke off their attack. They jumped to faster-than-light travel, disappearing in seconds. Raiders were predators, and predators didn't fight when they met something stronger. Ben opened a communication channel to the Klarn convoy. An elderly Klarn appeared on the screen, his mandibles trembling with emotion. "Thank you," the Klarn said. "We thought we would die." "Head for the Kepler station," Ben told him. "It's neutral territory. You'll be safe there." After the Klarn ships jumped away, Chris approached Ben. "Sir, should I file a report about protecting the trade route?" "Yes," Ben said. "Make it detailed and official. The brass will see right through it." "I know," Ben said, "but maybe they'll look the other way." 3 days later, Ben received a message from General Paul Hendricks. It was short and encrypted. "Continue discretionary operations. Official policy remains unchanged." Ben smiled. Humanity's official position was non-intervention. But unofficially, Earth was giving its commanders permission to help when they could. It wasn't much, but it was something. All across human space, other commanders received the same message. Small task forces began operating in crisis zones. They framed their interventions as protecting human interests or responding to threats. But everyone knew the truth. Humans couldn't stand by and watch innocents die. On Earth, in a small house in Colorado, Claire Martinez watched the news broadcasts. Every channel showed the same images: burning cities, refugee camps, fleet battles that lit up the darkness of space. The galaxy was tearing itself apart. Her communicator buzzed. It was General Paul Hendricks. "Ambassador Martinez, we need your help." "I'm retired," Claire said. "I know. But you understand the alien species better than anyone. You know their leaders, their cultures, their fears. We need you to go back." "The government's position is non-intervention. Officially, yes," Paul said. "But unofficially, we're working on a plan. We can't police the galaxy anymore, but maybe we can teach others to police themselves. We need someone to make the connections, to build the framework. That someone is you." Claire looked at the news screen. A Clarn hive city was burning. She had visited that city once. She remembered the libraries, the schools, the markets full of peaceful people living their lives. Now it was ash. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. On a reconnaissance ship deep in contested space, Captain Natalie Price reviewed her findings. She commanded a stealth vessel that gathered intelligence without being detected. For weeks, she had been mapping the conflicts, identifying the worst actors. Her analysis showed a disturbing pattern. The major powers like the Threll and Vakoth were following military codes. They targeted military installations and tried to minimize civilian deaths. But smaller factions weren't so careful. Pirate fleets raided colony worlds with impunity. Corporate mercenaries attacked any ship that got in their way. Criminal syndicates controlled entire systems, enslaving the populations. These groups had always existed, but human patrols had kept them contained. Now they operated freely. Natalie compiled her report and sent it back to Earth. The situation was worse than anyone had predicted. The galaxy wasn't just fighting wars. It was descending into chaos. She received orders to continue surveillance. Earth wanted detailed information on every conflict, every faction, every threat. They were planning something, though Natalie didn't know what. In the Galactic Council, chambers on Concordia Prime, Chancellor Vrel called an emergency session. Only half the delegates attended. The others were too busy dealing with wars in their own territories. "We must do something," Vrel pleaded. "The death toll rises every day. Entire species face extinction." The Threll delegate stood. "The Vakoth started this war." The Vakoth delegate hissed. "The Threll attacked our colonies." After decades of Vakoth aggression, lies, the argument continued for hours. No decisions were made, no actions were taken. The council was powerless, and everyone knew it. Vrel watched in despair. The organization that had governed the galaxy for millennia had become irrelevant. Without humanity to enforce its decisions, the council was just a talking forum. Words without power meant nothing. Back on Earth, Helen Carter met with her advisors. They discussed options, strategies, and possibilities. Could humanity return to its old role? The answer was no. Earth didn't have the resources, and the political will didn't exist. The public was divided. Some wanted to help the aliens. Others believed humanity should focus on its own problems. "We need a middle path," Paul Hendricks said. "We can't police the galaxy ourselves, but we can't just abandon it either." "What do you suggest?" Helen asked. "We teach them to police themselves. We provide training, equipment, and advisors. We help them build a peacekeeping force made up of their own species. It will take time, but it's the only sustainable solution." Helen considered the idea. It was ambitious, expensive, and risky, but it was better than the alternatives. "Draw up a proposal," she said. "We'll start with a pilot program." Across the galaxy, the wars continued. Species that had coexisted for centuries now slaughtered each other. Trade routes collapsed. Economies failed. Refugees numbered in the hundreds of millions. But in the darkness, small lights began to appear. Human ships operating on discretionary orders, saving who they could. Human diplomats making quiet connections, building bridges. Human strategists developing plans for a better future. Humanity had left the galaxy, but they hadn't abandoned it. They were searching for a new way, a better way, a way that didn't require humans to carry all the weight. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Captain Ben Rogers stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the tactical display. 3 billion dead. The number kept climbing. His crew worked quietly around him. They had just finished escorting another refugee convoy to safety. It was the 5th one this week. Each time, Ben had to explain his actions as protecting human trade routes or responding to distress calls in human-patrolled space. The excuses were getting thin. "Sir, incoming message from Earth," said Chris Page. "It's encrypted and marked urgent." Ben took the message to his ready room and decoded it. The orders were brief but significant. He was to report to a neutral station called Haven's Gate for reassignment. No details were provided. 2 days later, Ben arrived at Haven's Gate. The station was old but functional, floating in an empty system far from any conflict zone. As his shuttle approached, he saw other human ships docked at the station. Military vessels, all of them. General Paul Hendricks met him at the airlock. The general looked older than Ben remembered, worn down by months of crisis management. "Captain Rogers, thank you for coming," Paul said. "Walk with me." They moved through the station's corridors. Ben noticed alien workers everywhere, building something. Construction equipment filled entire sections. "What is this place?" Ben asked. "A training facility," Paul explained. "We're starting a program to teach alien species how to maintain their own peace. You've been selected to lead the first training class." Ben stopped walking. "Sir, I'm not a teacher. I'm a combat officer." "Exactly," Paul said. "These aliens don't need classroom instruction. They need practical training from someone who's actually done the job. Someone who's kept peace in hostile territory. That's you." They entered a large assembly hall. Inside, Ben saw dozens of aliens from different species. Threll stood next to Vakoth. Klarn mixed with Zentari, former enemies forced together by necessity. "These are volunteers," Paul said. "Every species sent their best soldiers. Your job is to turn them into a functional peacekeeping unit." Ben studied the aliens. They looked suspicious of each other. Some stood apart, refusing to interact with certain species. "They'll kill each other before I can train them." "Then don't let them kill each other," Paul said simply. "You have 3 months. Make it work." On Earth, President Helen Carter faced a press conference. Reporters bombarded her with questions about the training program. Was humanity returning to police the galaxy? Why were they spending resources on aliens when Earth had problems of its own? "We're not returning to our old role," Helen said firmly. "We're providing temporary support to help other species develop their own peacekeeping capabilities. This is an investment in long-term galactic stability." A reporter pressed harder. "The death toll is over 3 billion. Some say humanity caused this by leaving. How do you respond?" Helen took a breath. "Humanity did not cause these wars. We simply stopped preventing them. There's a difference. For 2 centuries, we acted as the galaxy's police force. That responsibility nearly broke us. We can't do it anymore, but we can help others learn to do it themselves." After the conference, Helen met with her advisors. Public opinion remained divided. Some supported the training program. Others wanted complete isolation. A vocal minority demanded that humanity return to full peacekeeping duties. "We need to show results," said her chief of staff, a woman named Linda Grant. "If the training program fails, political support will collapse." "Then it can't fail," Helen said. But privately she worried. Teaching aliens to work together after centuries of conflict seemed impossible. At Haven's Gate, Ben Rogers began the training. The first day was a disaster. He tried to organize the aliens into mixed-species squads. The Threll and Vakoth nearly fought. The Klarn refused to work with anyone who had attacked their colonies. The Zentari complained that their corporate doctrine was superior to military training. Ben called a halt after 3 hours. He stood before the assembled group and spoke plainly. "I know you hate each other. I know your species have fought wars. But right now, civilians are dying because nobody is protecting them. Refugees are starving because trade routes are blocked. The galaxy is burning and you're the only ones who can put out the fire." A Threll soldier named Karn stepped forward. He was large even for his species, with scars covering his gray skin. "Why should we trust the Vakoth?" "They killed my brother," a Vakoth soldier named Threll responded. "The Threll destroyed my home colony. 5 million of my people died." "Then you both understand loss," Ben said. "You both know what war costs. That's why you're here, because you're tired of losing people you love." The two soldiers stared at each other. Neither backed down, but neither attacked. It was a small moment, but Ben recognized it. They were listening. Across the galaxy, Claire Martinez continued her quiet diplomacy. She traveled to various worlds, meeting with leaders who wanted peace but didn't know how to achieve it. She didn't offer human military support. Instead, she offered something more valuable: knowledge. She met with Chancellor Vrel on his homeworld, an ocean planet where cities floated on artificial platforms. They stood on a balcony overlooking the sea. "Your training program won't work," Vrel said. "The hatred runs too deep." "Maybe," Claire admitted. "But what's the alternative? Let the wars continue until everyone is dead?" "The Galactic Council could enforce peace." "With what?" Claire asked. "The Council has no military, no enforcement mechanism. It's a debate society. Without humanity backing it, the Council is powerless." Vrel's webbed hands gripped the railing. "Then what do we do?" "You rebuild," Claire said. "Not the old Council, but something new. An organization with real power, real authority, real commitment from its members. A federation, not a council. The species will never agree to that. They value their sovereignty too much." "Then they'll keep fighting," Claire said. "Because sovereignty means nothing if your species goes extinct." She left Vrel with that thought and moved on to her next meeting. She had dozens more scheduled. Each conversation planted seeds. Some would grow, others wouldn't. But she had to try. Back at Haven's Gate, Ben's training continued. He focused on small practical exercises: rescue operations, convoy escorts, refugee evacuation, things that required cooperation but weren't combat missions. Slowly, the aliens began to work together, not because they liked each other, but because they had to. During a simulated rescue operation, a Klarn soldier named Trill got trapped under debris. A Threll soldier named Karn pulled him out. Neither mentioned it afterward, but Ben noticed. Small moments of humanity, ironically enough, between aliens. After 6 weeks, Ben conducted the first live exercise. His mixed species unit would escort a real refugee convoy through a dangerous sector. No weapons would be fired unless absolutely necessary. The goal was to show force and deter attacks. The operation succeeded barely. Pirates appeared but retreated when they saw the peacekeeping unit. The refugees reached safety, but coordination had been sloppy. Communications failed multiple times. 2 aliens nearly shot each other due to cultural misunderstandings about hand signals. Captain Natalie Price observed the exercise from her stealth ship. She compiled a detailed report. The peacekeeping unit functioned, but just barely. They needed years of training, and the galaxy didn't have years. Wars were escalating. Species were dying. Time was running out. She sent her report to General Hendricks with a harsh conclusion. The program needed more resources, more time, and more commitment. Otherwise, it was just expensive theater that would accomplish nothing. On Earth, President Helen Carter received Natalie's report. She also received reports from the front lines. The Threll-Vakoth War had reached a stalemate, but neither side would negotiate. Smaller conflicts were multiplying. Entire species faced extinction. Her political opponents smelled blood. They demanded a vote of no confidence. They argued that her middle path strategy was failing. Humanity should either commit fully to helping or isolate completely. Helen stood before the World Congress and defended her policies. Change takes time. We're building something that has never existed before, a galaxy that doesn't depend on one species to maintain peace. Yes, it's hard. Yes, people are dying, but returning to the old system would only delay the inevitable. The galaxy must learn to stand on its own. The vote was close, but Helen survived. For now. At Haven's Gate, Ben Rogers prepared his unit for graduation. After 3 months of training, they would attempt their first real mission. A humanitarian corridor needed to be secured through a contested system. Multiple factions were fighting in the area. Civilians were trapped and starving. The night before the mission, Ben couldn't sleep. He walked through the station and found Karn, the Threll soldier, standing in an observation lounge. The alien stared out at the stars. "Can't sleep either?" Ben asked. "I keep thinking about what happens if we fail," Karn said. "If the Vakoth and Threll on my team freeze up when we see enemy forces. If the old hatreds take over." "They might," Ben said honestly. "But they also might not. You've trained together for 3 months. You've saved each other's lives in simulations. That has to count for something." "I never thought I'd trust a Vakoth with my life," Karn admitted. "But Threll is a good soldier. Better than some thrall I've served with. Tell him that, Ben suggested. The first graduating class of peacekeepers became famous across the galaxy. News broadcasts showed Thrall and Vakoth soldiers working side by side. The images gave hope to billions who had seen nothing but war for months. But Ben Rogers knew the truth. One successful mission didn't mean the program worked. It just meant they had gotten lucky. Earth authorized expansion of the training program. Haven's Gate grew rapidly. More alien volunteers arrived. More human advisors were assigned. Within 2 months, 10 training classes were running simultaneously. Ben found himself promoted to program director. He missed field work, but someone had to coordinate the growing operation. He spent his days reviewing training schedules, approving curriculum changes, and dealing with the inevitable conflicts between species. The second graduating class attempted a similar mission to the first. They tried to secure a different humanitarian corridor in the Kepler sector. The mission failed. 3 peacekeepers died due to communication failures. A Klarn soldier gave an order that a Zentari soldier misinterpreted. They fired on a civilian ship by mistake. The death toll was 14 innocent refugees. Ben stood in the command center and watched the disaster unfold. His hands clenched into fists. This was his failure, his responsibility. Captain Natalie Price arrived at Haven's Gate 2 days after the failed mission. She found Ben in his office reviewing the mission recordings for the 20th time. "You can't save everyone," she said from the doorway. "I got those people killed." Ben replied without looking up. "The war got them killed," Natalie corrected. "You're trying to build something new. Mistakes will happen. Tell that to the families." Natalie sat down across from him. "I've been observing conflicts across the galaxy. I've seen things that would make this incident look like mercy. Entire colonies exterminated. Refugee ships destroyed for sport. War crimes that don't even have names yet. Your peacekeepers aren't making things worse, Ben. They're the only thing making anything better." Ben finally looked at her. "How bad is it out there?" "Worse than anyone on Earth realizes," Natalie said. She pulled up a star map on his screen. Red zones covered huge sections of the galaxy. The Thrall-Vakoth War is entering its 2nd year. Neither side can win, but neither will surrender. 4 other major conflicts are ongoing. Dozens of minor wars. And then there's the really disturbing part. She zoomed into a region called the Outer Darkness. Pirate kingdoms are forming. Corporate warlords are carving out territories. Criminal syndicates control entire systems. These aren't just raids anymore. They're building empires in the chaos. Ben studied the map. "How long until someone on Earth pays attention to this?" "They're paying attention," Natalie said. "They're just overwhelmed. The president is fighting a political battle. Half of Congress wants to abandon the galaxy completely. The other half wants to return to full peacekeeping. Nobody wants the middle path. On Earth, President Helen Carter faced exactly that battle. The failed peacekeeping mission gave her opponents ammunition. They demanded she end the training program immediately. She sat in the Oval Office with General Paul Hendricks and Linda Grant, her chief of staff. The walls felt like they were closing in. "We need a win," Linda said bluntly. "Something big. Something that shows the program works." "We can't manufacture success," Paul argued. "These things take time." "We don't have time," Linda shot back. "The vote is in 3 weeks. If we lose, funding for the program stops. Everything Ben Rogers built will disappear." Helen rubbed her temples. She had barely slept in days. "What if we expanded the program? Showed commitment instead of retreat?" "That costs money," Linda said. "Money Congress won't approve." "Then we make them approve it," Helen said. "Paul, prepare a proposal. I want 10 times the current training capacity. I want peacekeeping stations in every major sector. I want this to be too big to cancel." Paul nodded slowly. "That's a massive gamble, Madam President." "Everything is a gamble now," Helen said. "We either commit fully to this approach or we abandon it. There's no halfway." Far from Earth, on Concordia Prime, Claire Martinez continued her diplomatic work. She had been meeting with leaders for months, planting seeds of cooperation. Some were growing. Chancellor Vrel invited her to a secret meeting. Not just any meeting. He had gathered representatives from 30 major species. All of them wanted to discuss forming a new galactic organization. Claire entered the conference room and felt a surge of hope. These aliens were talking seriously about change. Not just complaints about the old Galactic Council, but concrete plans for something new. We cannot continue as we were, Frel began the meeting. The council failed because it had no power. It could talk but not act. We need an organization that can enforce peace. A Threll diplomat named Gore spoke up. The Threll Empire will not surrender sovereignty to some galactic supergovernment. Nobody is asking you to surrender sovereignty, Claire said carefully. But sovereignty means nothing if your species is extinct. What we're proposing is a federation. Member species keep their independence but agree to binding mutual defense pacts. And who enforces these pacts? Asked a Vakoth diplomat named Nessa. You do, Claire said. All of you together. That's what the peacekeeping program is building, a multi-species force that protects everyone. The debate went on for hours. Some species supported the idea. Others feared it. But for the first time since humanity left, aliens were seriously discussing cooperation instead of competition. Commander Jake Sullivan, who had been leading deep space exploration missions, received an unexpected recall to inhabited space. His ship, the Discovery, was pulled from its survey mission and sent to investigate anomalies in the Epsilon sector. Jake's science officer, a woman named Kate Morris, brought him the initial findings. Sir, we found something strange. Ancient ruins on a dead world. Jake studied the images. The ruins were massive, clearly built by an advanced civilization. How old? At least 50,000 years, Kate said. But here's the interesting part. The ruins contain data storage devices, still functional. They landed a team on the planet. The away mission spent 2 days carefully extracting data from the ancient devices. When they finally decoded the files, what they found shocked everyone. The ruins belonged to a previous galactic civilization, one that had risen to incredible heights then destroyed itself through endless wars. The data contained detailed records of their decline, species that had once cooperated turning against each other, peace kept only through force, eventually total collapse. Jake read the reports and felt a chill. The ancient civilization's story mirrored exactly what was happening in the current galaxy. The same patterns, the same mistakes, the same inevitable outcome. Send everything to Earth, he ordered. Mark it Priority 1. Then send copies to the Galactic Council on Concordia Prime. The galaxy needs to see this. The Discovery hit the galaxy like a shockwave. Ancient records showing that their current crisis wasn't new. It had happened before, and it had ended in extinction for everyone. Ben Rogers watched the news broadcasts from Haven's Gate. Every species was talking about the Discovery. Some dismissed it as irrelevant. Others saw it as a warning, but nobody could ignore it. Ambassador Claire Martinez saw an opportunity. She contacted Chancellor Vrel immediately. This is our chance. Show the galaxy what happened to the last civilization that refused to cooperate. Show them where the current path leads. Vrel arranged for the ancient records to be presented at a special session of the Galactic Council. Every species sent representatives. Even the Threll and Vakoth, still fighting their war, sent delegates. Jake Sullivan presented the findings himself. He showed images of dead worlds, the ruins of once great civilizations. He played audio files of the ancient species warning future generations about the dangers of division. They had technology more advanced than anything we have now, Jake explained. They could have reached the stars beyond this galaxy. Instead, they tore themselves apart over the same grievances, the same territories, the same pride that drives your current wars. Within 2 centuries of their peak, they were extinct. All of them. The chamber fell silent. The ancient civilization had included dozens of species. None survived. Total extinction. That was the price of eternal conflict. A young Aquian diplomat named Marcus stood up. What did they do wrong? What could they have done differently? They waited too long to cooperate, Jake said. By the time they realized they needed each other, the wars had gone too far. The hatred had become too deep. They couldn't stop even when they knew it would destroy them. Claire Martinez spoke next. We don't have to repeat their mistake. The Galactic Council has failed, but we can build something new. A federation based on mutual defense and shared prosperity. Not one species protecting everyone, but all species protecting each other. President Helen Carter watched the presentation from Earth. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The galaxy was finally listening. She gave orders to General Paul Hendricks. Approve the expansion. 10 times the training capacity. Whatever it takes. Back at Haven's Gate, Ben Rogers received orders to expand the program immediately. More trainers, more facilities, more resources. Earth was committing fully to the peacekeeping initiative. He gathered his staff and began planning. The first training class had been 50 aliens. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy looked different. Not peaceful, but different. War still raged in some sectors, but others had found fragile truces. The peacekeeping force had grown to 70,000 members from over 100 species, and the Galactic Council had dissolved itself, replaced by something new. The Galactic Federation held its founding ceremony on Concordia Prime. Ambassador Claire Martinez stood among the delegates, no longer as Earth's representative but as an observer. Humanity had equal representation now, no more than any other major power. Chancellor Vrel, now elected as the Federation's first Secretary General, gave the opening speech. We stand here because we learned from the mistakes of the past, both the recent past of our own wars and the ancient past of the civilization that came before us. We choose cooperation over conflict. We choose shared strength over individual weakness. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions watched as species that had fought brutal wars signed treaties of mutual defense. The Threll Empire and the Vakoth Collective ended their 2-year conflict with a negotiated peace. Not a happy peace, but an acknowledged stalemate that both sides could accept. Ben Rogers watched the broadcast from Haven's Gate, now transformed into the Federation Peace Academy. His original training facility had grown into a massive complex. 5,000 aliens were currently in training, with 10,000 more scheduled to arrive next month. He walked through the training grounds and saw mixed species units working together seamlessly. A year ago, such cooperation would have been impossible. Now it was normal. Threll and Vakoth soldiers ate lunch together. Klarn and Zentari shared quarters. The old hatreds hadn't disappeared, but they had been pushed aside by something more important: purpose. "Sir, you have a visitor," said Chris Page, who now ran day-to-day operations at the Academy. Ben found Captain Natalie Price waiting in his office. She looked exhausted but satisfied. "The pirate kingdoms are collapsing," she said without preamble. "The peacekeeping force hit 3 major strongholds last month. The warlords are on the run." "Good," Ben said. He had been planning those operations for months. The pirate kingdoms had become a cancer in the galaxy, enslaving populations and destroying colonies. The peacekeeping force had finally grown strong enough to deal with them. "There's something else," Natalie continued. "I've been analyzing the overall situation. Deaths from conflict are down 70% from peak levels. Refugee populations are stabilizing. Trade routes are reopening. The galaxy is healing." Ben sat back in his chair. "We did it." "Not we," Natalie corrected. "They did it. The aliens. We just showed them how." Sophie Blake, now a commander, had taken over the first Federation Joint Military Academy. She stood before a classroom of young aliens from a dozen species. They were the next generation, being raised to see past old prejudices. "Peacekeeping isn't about being the strongest," Sophie lectured. "It's about being the most trusted. You carry weapons, but your real power comes from the belief that you'll use those weapons fairly, that you'll protect everyone equally." A young Threll student raised a hand. "But what if someone attacks your own species? Can you remain neutral?" "You don't have to be neutral," Sophie said. "You have to be fair. There's a difference. Defend your species if they're attacked unjustly, but don't defend them if they're the aggressors. That's what separates peacekeepers from soldiers." The question would have been impossible 2 years ago. Now it was just part of the curriculum. On Earth, President Helen Carter prepared to leave office. Her term was ending, and she had chosen not to run again. The last 2 years had aged her. But as she reviewed her accomplishments, she felt proud. General Paul Hendricks visited her for their final official meeting. "The Federation is requesting permanent human advisors for the peacekeeping force. They want 500 officers to help train and coordinate operations." "Approve it," Helen said. "But make sure the advisors understand their role. They're there to help, not to lead. The Federation has to stand on its own." "Yes, Madam President." Helen looked out the window toward the stars. "Do you think we did the right thing, Paul? Leaving the galaxy to force them to grow up?" "Yes," Paul said without hesitation. "The old system was broken. We couldn't maintain it, and they couldn't function without us. Now they're learning to function independently. That's worth the price we paid." 3 billion dead," Helen said quietly. "That's the price. 3 billion dead in 2 years of transition," Paul acknowledged. But how many would have died over the next century if we'd kept the old system? How many humans would have died keeping peace for species that refuse to keep it themselves? There are no good choices in leadership, Madam President. Only less terrible ones. Claire Martinez gave a speech at the Federation founding ceremony. She had been asked to share humanity's perspective on the changes of the past 2 years. When humanity left, everyone thought it was the beginning of the end, she said, and in a way it was. The end of an era where one species carried the burden for all. The end of easy answers and simple solutions. But it was also a beginning. The beginning of a galaxy that takes responsibility for itself. She paused and looked at the assembled delegates. The ancient civilization we discovered left us a warning. They failed because they waited too long to cooperate. They let pride and hatred destroy them. You didn't make that mistake. Yes, many died. Yes, the transition was painful. But you survived. More than survived. You built something new. The delegates applauded. Claire stepped down from the podium and found Chancellor Vrel waiting. Thank you, the Aquian said simply. For everything. I didn't do much, Claire replied. I just talked to people. Sometimes that's what matters most, Vrel said. The galaxy needed someone to believe we could be better. You were that someone. In deep space, Commander Jake Sullivan led a joint exploration mission. His crew included humans, Threll, Vakoth, Klarn, and a dozen other species. They were venturing beyond the galactic rim, into territories humanity had originally planned to explore alone. Kate Morris, his science officer, studied the sensor readings. There's something out here, sir, big, really big. They approached the anomaly carefully. What they found changed everything. Not ancient ruins this time, but an active threat. Unknown alien vessels, more advanced than anything in the galaxy. And they were heading toward inhabited space. Jake immediately sent a priority message to the Federation. Unknown hostile force detected. Estimated arrival at galactic border in 6 months. Threat level critical. The message reached Concordia Prime within hours. Secretary General Vrel called an emergency session of the Federation Council. Every species sent their representatives. We face a crisis, Vrel announced. An external threat that no single species can handle. This is the first real test of our Federation. For the first time in galactic history, the major powers agreed immediately. No debates, no delays, no political maneuvering. They voted unanimously to mobilize the Federation fleet. President Helen Carter, in her final days in office, received the request from the Federation. They wanted human ships to join the Defense Force. Not to lead it, but to be part of it. She approved immediately. Send word to all Defense Fleet commands. We fight with the Federation, not for it, as equals. Ben Rogers received orders to deploy his peacekeepers, 70,000 aliens who had trained to keep peace now prepared for war. But this was different from the civil wars that had torn the galaxy apart. This was defense of their shared home against an external threat. He gathered his senior staff. This is what we trained for. Not peace through domination, but peace through cooperation. Every species working together because they choose to, not because someone forces them. The Federation fleet assembled. 5,000 ships from 200 species. Human vessels took positions alongside former enemies turned allies. The Threll and Vakoth fleets that had fought each other 2 years ago now flew in formation together. Jake Sullivan's exploration ship joined the fleet. He had discovered the threat. Now he would help face it. Captain Natalie Price used her reconnaissance skills to scout the approaching enemy. She sent detailed intelligence reports that helped the Federation plan their defense. Sophie Blake's students, young aliens who had never known the old galaxy, volunteered to serve on the Federation ships. They represented the future, a generation that saw cooperation as normal instead of exceptional. The enemy fleet arrived at the galactic border. They were powerful, advanced, and hostile, but they faced something they hadn't expected. A unified galaxy. The battle lasted 3 days. Ships from hundreds of species fought side by side. Humans covered Threll vessels. Vakoth defended Klarn positions. The peacekeepers who had trained together fought together with perfect coordination. The enemy retreated. Not defeated, but bloodied enough to reconsider their attack. The Federation had proven its strength. After the battle, Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of his damaged ship. They had taken hits but survived. Around him, his multi-species crew worked to make repairs. A Threll engineer helped a human technician fix a damaged console. A Vakoth medical officer treated a Klarn soldier's injuries. This was what humanity had wanted when they left. Not a galaxy dependent on human protection, but a galaxy that could protect itself. Ben Rogers received casualty reports.